one thing that comes up in education conversations a lot is the difference between teaching boys and teaching girls. And I find that, I know I hear a lot down here. I guess I don't know in the States as much what it would be. But I find down here that, like, the girls are generally seen as more academic, more successful in school. The boys are more playful. And there's maybe just this idea that, well, boys will be boys. We accept more behavior from boys than girls because we just expect boys to be rambunctious and whatnot.
Well, I think, um, in all fairness, that is how it was viewed more in the past. Yes, I think we've come a long way.
Okay.
We have understood that it's not just a case of boys will be boys. So if boys will be boys, then how do we allow boys to be boys? And as a teacher in the classroom, boys will be boys. So our teaching should also reflect how we are allowing boys to be boys while learning, and not just, okay, boys will be boys, so they're more interested in running and playing. So you allow them to run and play at the expense of, gaining whatever it is that they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, begun to understand that, and strides have been made in terms of, tackling that issue.
And so, what do you think is sort of what do boys need that's going to be different from what girls need in the classroom? How do you approach a boy's teaching different than a girl's? Or do you?
Well, yes, I do. Of course, with more information, learning a little more about the difference between how boys and girls learn. There are some significant differences, and we do have to make a conscious effort to incorporate that in our teaching if we really want to give the boys a fair chance at achieving. For example, research has shown that boys are much more active than girls generally. So we cannot expect them to sit with their little legs closed, their hands on their laps, and they're just sitting there, taking in and listening to you.
Yeah.
I mean, a girl would most likely, it will not happen all of the time, but a girl will most likely just sit still and listen to you, take it in. A boy will want to do things.
Yeah.
Right? So that is one thing that we know.
So they got life easy over at the girls' school. Everybody's just sitting there quietly.
Well, not necessarily. That's why I said most of the time, not all. And then now we have a different caliber of students anyway. So yes. Sometimes it's almost very difficult to draw the line between what the boys do and what the girls do. But generally, we're speaking, in general terms. Boys like a lot of competition.
Yeah.
The girls will do their little thing. Not that they don't appreciate a good competition, but for boys, everything is competitive. It has to be competitive to really excite them. So knowing that, we can actually put that in our teaching, use those strategies that get them, have a lot of games, make it fun, have them compete with each other, use a lot of kinesthetic activities and not just auditory, just sitting down there and watching, That is why we use the multisensory approach a lot.
Yeah.
So you try to get everybody involved. Let the boys do something, go outside, even if you're using, let's say we were teaching sight words.
Yeah.
Use something like a bowling game. Put the words on the, on the pins and have the boys roll that ball. Whichever one they hit, they have to say the words. So they're not just sitting there, just rattling out stuff and whatever, but they're actively engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we have noticed that when we put that in, the number one thing is engagement. Keeping them actively engaged.
Yeah.
By all means, if they are actively engaged, that you have their attention, they're focused.
Yeah.
They're there on what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
If you're teaching and the boys are just there getting bored and so on, there's no real active engagement. I mean, how much learning will take place when children are motivated, excited, and actively engaged? We know that they learn better, right? So these are some of the things that we really make sure we put in. So every day those boys come, there's something to look forward to.
Listen, on some level, there has to be some movement involved. Like when we see a child struggling with something, when we see a behavior, and that behavior continues to exist day after day after day, no matter how many times we address it with them, I do feel like we've got to dig a little bit deeper and understand where is this coming from? Because if the student knows they're going to get in trouble for it, and yet every day they continue to do it, either they really don't like me and they're just trying to make my day hard, or they're not completely in control of it, and so I've got to figure out how to adapt it. And so with that, there's a video I want us to watch, and then we can talk a little bit about it after.
Okay.
When I was about 10 years old, and I was in school, and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, "Hey, stop tapping." A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, "Clint, you have to stop tapping." It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, "Okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands." So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, looked at me, and he yelled. And he said, "Clint, stay after class." And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me. And I will never forget it. So I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. He walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here. I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "No, I need you to know something. You're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer."
Interesting. You see, sometimes children behave in certain ways and it's not in accordance with our expectation. So right away we X them out. But it's so important to just understand where it's coming from or why it's happening. And look at that simple solution.
Yep.
Very, very simple.
And how often do we miss those opportunities? How often do we just continue to get after the child, like all of his teachers before Mr. Jensen, because I don't have time. I've got 30 kids in front of me. I can't put focus on this one individual. It's much easier for me to send you to the principal's office than it is for me to deal with it in this classroom right now while 29 other students need my attention as well.
But you see, again, education, being aware, knowing. Because I'm pretty sure I can safely say that some of these teachers probably just did not know better.
Yeah.
Some of them probably just did not know better. Some may have known, but then again, it will take them away from the normal everyday stuff, you know, so they just choose the easy way out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes we don't know.
And I find to be a Mr. Jensen, you have to be brave. Like for Mr. Jensen to have that kid in class, let's say that just him talking about his experience, it sounds like he probably had a reputation amongst the teachers, right? We all know those students that are going to cause us trouble. And this kid probably was one of those students that everybody knew he's going to cause trouble. And so for Mr. Jensen to go and say, "You know what, I'm not going to see you as a troublemaker. I'm going to see you as a student that needs me. I'm going to give you drumsticks. I'm going to allow you to tap a little bit." All the other teachers in that school are probably saying, "Oh, you see Mr. Jensen over there? He doesn't even discipline his kids. He's just letting that little guy drum in class all day."
Yes, you get that. But you know, sometimes you just have to be the black sheep for a little while,
Yeah.
especially if you believe in what you're doing, you know, and how you're helping the child. One thing that I find is very common is that we're quick to label children as being rude when they express themselves. Yes. Now, I don't know if it is that I understand it because of the way I express myself. It's easy for people to say that you're out of place or you're disrespectful and so on. I mean, granted, there are times when children are.
Yeah.
But then if we just take a little time to understand what they're saying, sometimes they may not say it in the best way. But if we understand the message that they're trying to send across,
Yeah.
then we can understand how to help them. There's just that incident where a child was writing something. I think it's a book report. And there's an area where the child had to say what it is that who would she recommend the book to or something like that. And I think the child said, not a particular person, because the person is going to destroy the book, but you know, and so on. It's easy to interpret that as the child being selfish and so on. But if you really understand what the child is saying, I believe that the child is just being very protective of the book that he loves, he or she loves.
Absolutely.
So that is why the child does not want the book in a particular other child's hands, because it's known that, okay, that book will just be, you know, history soon, right? But in saying it, the child is deemed
Rude.
yes, rude, selfish, you don't want to share the book and whatever. And then you already telling yourself that little story in your head that this child is being, you know, whereas it's not that at all. The child just loves the book so much that the child wants to keep protecting the book. So that's where it's coming from, not a place of being selfish and all of that, but protection, keeping that book, preserving it.
Absolutely.
Just understanding what the child is saying makes a whole lot of a difference.
And once that reputation gets built, you start to think in your head, this child's rude and whatever.
Yes.
And then you go and tell your teacher friend. And then before you know it, the teachers have just identified this child. And now the rest of his time at that school, he's going to be met with that label. Like, I know you're a rude child, so there's going to be no forgiveness. Maybe you say something a little wrong. Maybe you don't say it wrong at all, but I just decide to take it that way because I know you're rude. And all of a sudden, now that child's getting negative feedback from his teachers because of this negative reputation that maybe isn't even necessarily deserved. You know, taking it back to my own story for a minute, like, I mean, the only reason I have a high school diploma is because so most of my time was spent in Bismarck. But I think around my sophomore year, we moved to Washington State. And so I finished school in Washington State. Now, in the Bismarck district, they had me on track for a certificate of completion, which basically just means he was in the school with us until the 12th grade. But it's not a high school diploma that shows you actually learned the things you're supposed to learn. But when I went to Washington, they didn't know me at all. All they had was my record. And based on my record, actually, when they first put me in classes, they put me in classes that were like learning how to make friends, learning how to tell time, like the lowest classes that they have, teaching us elementary level stuff. And I mean, I'm in those classes. I'm clearly above that. So once they see me in class, they're like, okay, this doesn't make sense for him to be in these classes. And so there's a different mindset. Like the school in Bismarck didn't see any issue with where they had me placed because there was this reputation that had been built. I was with that district for so long that it was just cemented that nobody could see past the label. When I went to a school where that label didn't really exist, they didn't have that experience, they could instantly see that this makes no sense and put me in the higher classes.
Okay.
But had we never made that move, I would have ended up with a certificate of completion. Maybe I would have gone and gotten a GED at some point. Maybe my life would have gone in a completely different direction. Who knows what would have happened? But at the end of the day, that label is part of what allowed for me to fall through the cracks, essentially.
Yes, yes. A lot of the times we just need to take a little time to understand some of the children. Well, not some, all of them. Take a little time to understand. And yes, it gets challenging sometimes. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and then sometimes, even if we know all what we know, we may still lose it, you know, once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
But then we just have to check ourselves and say that, no, wait, you know, like take a little step back because we're human, it happens.
That's it. I don't think you can be Mr. Jensen for every single student that comes through.
Yes.
Mr. Jensen made that connection with Clint, and it's a good thing he did. It worked out. It was great. But there are probably lots of students that went through Mr. Jensen's class that he didn't make that connection with, because that does take a lot of energy. And if I've got 30, 40 students I'm dealing with every year, to put in make that kind of connection with all 40 of them, I think as a human, we just don't have the capacity. Like, one of the challenges I think we have in our school systems is our class sizes. I don't know how it is for y'all down here. Like, we're in a nice small country school, so our classes aren't terrible. But in the States, it's not uncommon to have a class of 30, 40 students. And then if you're in high school and you're dealing with different classes every day, you've got 40 students per class, 5 classes a day. Now you're dealing with 200 students a day. I mean, at the end of the day, just making the minimal connection takes everything you can.
Yes, it can be challenging based on the number that you have. It can be. But, well, luckily for us here, our population is small.
Right.
So it's almost like we have no excuse, you know? And everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, because our school is a community school.
Right.
So most of the students live right there in the area, you know, so you would know quite a bit about their background and so on. So to me, not giving them that opportunity, it's, I would say, what's the excuse for not doing it?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're and even if the child was a complete stranger, the expected thing would be that as a teacher, you know, you'd give him a listening ear and do whatever. Far less given that the child is right there in the area. Most of us know everybody around. Yeah, I think we just need to make the effort.
No, and I would say that's another
to
advantage of your neighborly community, because you've got that connection, because you have that culture where neighbors know each other. When the children come into the school, we all know them. Outside of school, we know them.
Yes.
So it's not just my student in first grade, it's my neighbor's child. I have more of a connection, I have more of an investment and more opportunity, right? Because even outside of the school day, like, I might see that child here, or I know their mom really well, or whatever, where I can continue to provide that support. And it's just part of my life. It's not me having to carve out time to do this. It's me just living my life.